All this technology is great when it works. Let's see if we can get it to work. There we go. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rates and Lanes podcast. I'm your host, Rico Muhammad. I'm going to be joined by my co-host very shortly. We have a very special guest joining us this evening. But before we get into all of that, ladies and gentlemen, if you would, please like, share, and subscribe to the show on the channel. If you find anything that we say or discuss entertaining, helpful, in any kind of way, and if you know someone that might be able to benefit from this information, by all means, tag them. Tell a friend to tell a friend. And with that being said, let me welcome in my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. Good evening, Chuck. How are you?
We're doing great, Rico. How you doing, buddy?
I really cannot complain. It's slow and steady wins the race, as they say. So we just kind of trying to stay slow and steady, and like we always say, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise.
It's so true. They're not just metaphors; they're things to live by.
Absolutely. Well, you rustled us up a new guest that's joining us tonight. Why don't you give us a little background, a little introduction on?
Well, I've had the pleasure of working with Andrew Stacey personally. He was with Traffics for a number of years, but he is this gentleman started out from the shop floor, got behind the wheel of a truck, was an owner-operator for many years, and then a company driver, and then got into safety, and he's got educated in safety. He now holds degrees in as a safety specialist, as well as a crash investigator. So he's done it all. And he lives in Alberta, Canada. So he's got a little bit different a perspective just from where he lives, probably dealing with some of the things he sees in the energy industry, things like that. We're going to find out all about it. He probably can tell us a little bit about the ice roads and everything too. Andrew, good to see you, buddy. It's been a long time.
It's been far too long, Chuck. And how are you guys doing? Hello, Rico.
Good evening.
We're doing great.
Thanks for taking the time out to join us tonight.
No, not a problem. It's either here or I'm going to go outside and get wet in this glorious Toronto weather.
Well, yeah, Alberta's a little weird too, weather. It's either snow or it's warm. There's one or the other.
Yeah, my wife texted me just before the show and said, enjoy, because I have to go shovel the walks. And I'm like, well, okay, I'll take what I've got.
Yeah, you're darn right. So, Andrew, since the last time we spoke, you've done an awful lot. I see you're a certified safety specialist now for Aviva, as well as a crash investigator, which must really help in that job. I got to ask you something. I'm just curious. What do you see as the biggest cause of truck crashes?
Driver hiring. It's basically the driver hiring and the lack of it's the lack of the fortitude that goes through to put the people in. People still, it's partially, some of it's misunderstanding. They're not really understanding what is really truly required. And then it's resources, right? I mean, it's a dog eat dog world where the drivers are very, it's very hard to get a driver. So, you don't want to keep a driver waiting for too terribly long. I mean, even when, Chuck and I, when you and I were working together and we were recruiting, it was very hard to string a driver along to get them to do all the right things because, if it took too long, the next company took them.
Yeah. So true. Do you think that can be curtailed to some degree by a company hiring the driver without going through all of the rigmarole, but not they've done all the testing that up for their
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's being divulged onto the. Are we good?
Yeah, I think we're
I think
fine.
we're good now.
Okay. Yeah, there's lots of things that that companies can do to be innovative. To bring the good people in and stuff like that. But it's all at a cost, right? I mean, with the companies, it boils down to there's profit over safety, and then there's safety and profitability,
Yeah.
and it's understanding the two, and it goes from the culture from the top down,
Oh yeah.
and you know, so if the company is worried completely about the bottom line, it's going to be a harder sell. Um, but then again, I mean, we both know what trucking's like. It's hard.
It is, but
Absolutely.
you have to run lots of miles. I mean, thousands and thousands of miles to recover the financial loss from one crash.
And it's getting worse, right? Like with the litigation that you see. I mean, this isn't anything to do with my background. I mean, you just got to read. You got to read the truck news and the daily reports with the nuclear verdicts that are down south, or even some of the litigations that are going on up here in Canada, class action lawsuits, and the the injury lawyers that are coming across. It
Oh yeah.
it boils down to it's you, you know I used to um, have a lot more, like when I was recruiting, I thought I would have a lot more leeway, and if I had to go back to do it today, I wouldn't. I'd protect the driver and make sure that I did everything right the first time. Not only protecting the driver, you're protecting the company. And
Yeah.
where before, we could, you know, maybe move the needle a little bit to the left. Where in today's world, I just wouldn't suggest that.
No, I think you have to have strict hiring practices and adhere to them. I don't care how many trucks you got parked against the fence and the bank manager calling you on the phone every day, going, you're not meeting your obligations here, and you have to say no to drivers that aren't qualified. They're up to you, and don't lower your standards. That's what I think. Tell me, what's your thoughts?
Well, I've done some research into the nuclear verdicts, and because it can be, even though we don't have nuclear verdicts in Canada, the same can be relayed up here when it comes to driver hiring, and it really should, because for a lot of the carriers here, they travel into the United States, so they're going to have that exposure anyways, right? So
Yeah, as soon as you
it's
hit the border,
yeah,
you're
funny that I'm actually kind of working on a new article just about exposure down into the United States, and it was one of those things that just crossed my mind. I was sitting there thinking, like, it's all too often that we take the United States for granted. Being a Canadian, we just kind of look at it like it's. And I said it for years. The border is nothing but a tax grab, right? You go across the border, we're the same kind of people. We're
yeah,
the cities look the same, the roads look the same. The only difference is miles an hour to kilometers an hour. Uh, Yet you're in a completely different country.
yeah.
You're completely in their immersed in their law, right? So when it comes to driver hiring up here, if you're crossing into the United States, you really have to be focused on what those exposures are down in the States, and they're very real.
Yes, I think sometimes people overlook that. Um, Canadian carriers overlook that when they just think, it is an extension of our country. It's not. You're sending your truck and your driver into a foreign nation.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it's the it's the best of both worlds when we have the two countries that we can just flip and flop between the two, and we can have those things. But yeah, you just and every state is different, every province is different.
Yeah.
So it's really doing this job. I've learned that, and I joke about it quite often, where I'll say to people here in Canada, because I travel across Canada quite often, and I look after all 10 provinces and the Arctic. So I'm from ocean to ocean. Next week I'll be in Vancouver. So um, we have four different countries within our country, you know, and every if you're looking at it provincially, we've got 10 different countries.
Yeah. But, you know, Rico has 50 different countries.
Yeah, that's
I,
true. I mean, it's very true.
so one of the
So,
things that we talked about a little bit with another one of our guests up in New Jersey, we talked when we're speaking about crashes and everything. But New Jersey had enacted or implementing raising the insurance rates,
Mm.
the minimum insurance rates. How do you think that may do you think that may play a factor? Is that going to be like the first domino that falls, or do you think that some other places might try to follow suit?
the coverage, I think it's from $1 to $3 million, or 750 to.
Went from 750 to I think it was I think it was I think it was 3 million.
Yeah,
It was three
Yeah,
yeah.
million.
I read about it. I've heard very little conversation about it up here, to be honest, um, because it's not something that we dive into very often. Like I do see carriers that travel in the United States, but when it comes to coverage and stuff like that, it's not something like, especially in the risk service area that I'm in, that we get too deeply involved in. So to be honest, I don't have an answer for that one.
Okay.
And from your experience in thinking about from a risk standpoint, and we're talking about crashes as well. How often how big of a problem still is distracted driving?
Oh, that took over impaired driving. So I've done a fair amount of research on that too, because lucky enough with my job, I get to do these kinds of things because I get to write articles for industry magazines and for blogs for our website. And so distract and as an avid motorcyclist, distracted driving became one of my major pet peeves.
Right.
Is my wife and I would go out riding, and I taught her how to ride 5 years ago. So you know, I mean, when you're putting somebody that you care about on a bike,
Right.
you know, you're starting to worry. And everywhere we went in the city, we could just see people just sitting there on their phones at all
Yeah.
times, right? And it's so frustrating. So I got into that to find out, you know, a few little things, you know, items like and maybe check this out with friends and family at home. The average person puts their phone down; they have to check it within 45 minutes, you know, because it's that urge. There's a real link now. There's that dopamine effect that they need to go in and check the phone in case, you know, people feel it vibrating when it's not vibrating anymore. And you know, if you've got a fleet of vehicles, you have to anticipate that you're going to have a certain amount of that fleet texting or being on their phone or doing something of distracted. So it's a major concern.
I agree. I just have to say one thing. I motorcycled for probably 25 years, all safe. And I gave it up when I noticed people starting to text. Every mile I did in one of our trucks, looking down and seeing these idiots in cars going like this, texting, was another mile I didn't do on my motorcycle. Finally, the bike was in the dry shed for 3 weeks, 4 weeks at a time. And I thought, truth of the matter is, I've lost my moxie to get on this damn thing because I'm afraid one of these texters is going to take me out. So I
Well,
understand.
it I was in the safety department when all like I started my life in the safety world when this all really started to uh, you know, when the cell phones were in there and all that
Right.
kind of stuff. And I can remember, you know, driving myself. There's a few distinct times I can remember, but I used to be horrible at it. Like, I mean, I could not let it go. It was such a new thing. I'd drive and text anytime I got into a cell range when I was going through, say, Northern Ontario or across the prairies, right?
Right.
Um, and today, knowing what I know now with forensics in phones, the just the fact inside your vehicle alone, the you know the infotainment unit that's in the middle of your vehicle nowadays, how much data that is carried from those devices, and it can be forensically reviewed upon a serious collision. There's no way. They go in the middle of the vehicle now. They go on do not disturb, and that's it. That's all there is to it.
There's no hiding anymore. Now, I do have to ask you a question. I see a lot of truck drivers, and I would probably say 50, maybe 60% with headsets on. What's the status with that?
Well, as far as I mean, in Rico, you can probably being down there, you'd probably be able to speak more of this. But I do believe Bluetooth is still legal pretty much everywhere. But that being said, we do know that it is still a conversation that is taking your brain into a different place. That still causes it can cause a mental distraction. So again, it's one of those things that in today's world with technology and the way people communicate, depending on the kind of routes you're doing or services you're providing and stuff like that, these people they use them, but it shouldn't be, because it can be equally as counterproductive as texting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a company by company policy type situation when it comes to Bluetooth and headsets. Um,
Yeah.
some companies, for liability reasons, I think they put it. The last company that I worked for, I know that they made an addendum to the employee handbook and made all the employees sign that you wouldn't be talking on the cell phone, but everybody was still coming in the terminal still.
We
So,
see
So
them
I
here.
think it
We
was
do
just a
see it here all the
situation.
time.
I think that was a situation where they were just trying to cover themselves from a liability standpoint,
but
saying that, hey, we told the drivers not to.
yeah, I know. But that being said, if a driver is on his Bluetooth with his headset and he's going down the road and there's a crash, would that add fuel to the fire? And I'm going to talk about the U.S. because there's certainly a hell of a lot more litigious down there than we are. Um, but would that add fuel to the fire with especially when you have a fatality, and rule more against the driver, even if he or she wasn't really doing anything wrong at that particular moment, except they were on their phone and the car did something really dumb and cut in front of them? Does that put more of the onus of that crash on that truck driver because he or she was on their phone?
I'm going to screw up this one-liner here, and I know that, but I was actually just reading a study done by the Atari Institute down in the United States when it comes to highly the nuclear verdicts, so the high jury rewards. And there's a line in there that says, you know, did your operation do everything possible to avoid that accident from occurring? And so, not verbatim, but that's basically the gist of that sentence. And so, like you said, Rico, you've put out a policy, and you still watch guys coming into the terminal with them on, then the policy has no bite. So, for me, if I owned a fleet of trucks today, or if I even ever had to go back to driving my own today. And my brother's a testament to this, being an ex-Calgary police officer, that, the camera in his vehicle faces forward and back because he refuses to ever have he's going to be able to prove that he was not distracted at any point in time if something were to happen. So if a distraction's there, it's there. But remember, distracted driving isn't just the cell phone. It could be
Right.
anything from having a cigarette to a glass of water to eating while you're going down the road. Any one
Right,
of those can contribute to being a distracted driving event.
right.
Good point. Um,
So we got CVSA road check getting ready to come up. We're pushing up against that, and from what I understand, they're supposed to be the emphasis this year is going to be they're actually they want to search the cabs. They want to see if you're transporting any type of illegal material or left hand cigarettes or anything like that, and uh, and they're also doing the making sure that you have done your drug and alcohol queries for those drivers that are in the trucks. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I read that that's coming out in May. I really hope that it turns around to be a good one this year. Speaking just in my own personal opinion, I wish Canada would come up with a drug and alcohol policy, especially with us allowing, cannabis legally throughout the country, right? I do. We've got some different laws that have popped up here in Canada, depending on the province that you're in now, for zero tolerance with it and everything else. But again, I would personally like to see the market come up with something to do with drug and alcohol.
Yeah, it's got to be. You know what? I couldn't agree more. Because the way it's way too vague up here. There's not really, you're not supposed to be impaired. Well, that's great. Yeah, you're not supposed to be. But I know that the town we live in or near, there's 5,000 people in the town. I think there's 3 or 4 stores that sell pot. So it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I was in New York on the weekend. It's everywhere there as well. And I think it's about 24 states now have legalized it.
So it's definitely becoming a little bit more of the norm than they accept.
Which is okay, but you know what? I think like something's got to be done because like we all share that road. I really think before they ever legalize it anywhere in North America, they should have come up with a thing like a breathalyzer. Pretty simple.
Well, and I think that here in the United States, I think that they have amended the rule too. I think starting in, I want to say November, if you have a positive drug test, that your CDL will be revoked. Period. Point blank. Gone. For nada. So it's getting serious. You still have a lot of people I've noticed, especially on Facebook and different places. You'll still see some people pop up and say I got popped on a random drug test or whatever, and I don't know. I think that you knew what you were signing up for when you decided to get into this industry. I just don't think that the risk is nowhere near worth the reward.
No.
Well, we've got the our rights and freedoms up here, I guess, that kind of stop these things at weird junctions, and it's a safety sensitive type thing. But I'll check into this for you, Chuck, because I'm just digging into my memory. I do believe, like the Alberta Sheriff's Department, they do have a way of testing for cannabis in the back of their cars now. It goes along with their sanction program that came out in, I want to, again, testing my brain here, I think it was in 2020. So for commercial vehicles, I could do some background check into that and give you some updates on that. But I think there is some ways of doing that now.
You know, if all these states and now Canada has totally legalized it, and I really think that if they get another Democratic, win in November, I think you'll probably see the U.S. legalize it. But they've got to come up with a better policy. And I've talked to people about this. If somebody takes it on Friday night, are they impaired on Monday? I don't know. I don't have the answer. If they get roaring drunk on Friday, are they impaired on Monday? I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, they do have measurements that they can figure that out. Where, it would be like if you and I decided, it was Super Bowl Sunday and we were going to have a few beers together, and then, I have one too many, but I'm going to drive your truck for you on Monday morning, and I wake up with only 3 to 4 hours worth of sleep. There's a pretty good chance I'm still going to have that impairment inside me, right? So that would cause a problem.
Yeah, I think the airline pilots. Here's one. If you drive a CMV, I have no pity for you at all when you make that choice versus your career and safety of others and yourself. You deserve everything that's coming to you. I can't disagree with that. 100%. It's how you make your living.
I took it seriously.
Yeah. I think you were still with us, and I'm positive you were. And we had that driver. All of a sudden, he was an owner operator, and he tested positive. It was one of the 2 or 3 that we had in all the years that we had drug testing. And he tried to make up some story that his in-laws put it in the stew or something, and it was just, I'm not making this shit up, guys.
No,
Right there,
no,
Andrew.
no. I back in my safety days, and this was after you, but back in my safety days, I had a driver that actually tested positive for cocaine at one place, and I was amazed because I was like, somebody's making a little too much money if they can afford cocaine. But anyways, when we discussed it, of course the driver was like, no, there's no cocaine in my system. They had to have put it on my spaghetti. I thought it was Parmesan cheese. So that's a
Where was he having
like,
spaghetti? I don't want to
yeah,
go there.
that's a plate of spaghetti for you. But I mean, those are some of the stories that come out of the woodwork when these things happen, right? So I'm sure that's not the worst out there.
No, I'm sure, and I do know that I remember when it first came out, there was a tolerance allowed that just in case you were in a location where people were ingesting marijuana, and
Well, yeah, they can also see whether you've done that, like whether you've actually done the ingested or if you've been secondhand.
Secondhand.
Yeah.
yeah, but I do think I think it lies, I think we can control our industry pretty well. Not perfect, because from what I'm reading in the trade rags, the number of positive results, it's staggering. Okay, so we do have a problem compared to what it was, let's say, 5 years ago before the legalization of this substance. But my other worry is you have all these other people driving cars, and even your people driving small parcel vans that are all they're intoxicated, and they're sharing the road with our trucks.
Well, you know what scared me the other day was I was at the gym, and this
Yeah.
is in Airdrie where I live, just north of Calgary.
Right.
And I got out of the car, and the smell of pot just from coming from three cars that were in that line at the gym. And I was thinking to myself, I thought you were going for gains, not munchies, but you know, I'm the worst pot guy out there because I think my mother scared it into me that basically there'd be death upon me if I ever went around it, so I never did. But I mean, the smell of it is just so atrocious. I can't stand it. But those people are still they're leaving the gym. They're just sitting there getting fried in their car, and then they're just going to go home.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Wow.
Let's see.
Here's
Gino
one.
says we had a guy test positive for cocaine, and I was wondering why he was riding around with the park with the PTO engaged. Man, tore the transmission off.
Yeah.
well, now you know.
Well, I guess it's not just the substance that they say is so expensive. It must be the damage you do when you take it.
Oh. Even when I was driving personally down there, I know that there was a big thing about meth. And you know how
Yeah.
meth would get drivers like so wired up that they could go from coast to coast. And
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was back in the day when we were doing those coast to coast things. And I mean, I started back right at I got to see the last couple of years of the heyday of we'll call it the outlaw trucking,
Oh, yeah.
where it was pills and booze and pills and booze and pills and booze. And that's how I started the game. And, I don't know. I never understood it. And to this day, I've never had a company push me that hard that I would have to have done anything like that.
Well, I remember when I got into it, and it was all gypsies back in those days. And I don't think there were too many gypsy companies that didn't have a stash of pills inside the ceiling tiles.
Yeah.
That was normal. And I had a good friend of mine. He's passed away now. He ran a beautiful fleet of 16, 17 trucks. And Andrew, you're going to cringe when you hear this. Out of 17 trucks, he wrote one off a year. and he didn't have any collision insurance because he bought, with the money he would have paid for collision, he bought an extra truck because he knew he was going to write off one a year, and he did. And you know what? He was one of those guys that had he had the pills in the ceiling tiles, and his guys would be up all day running around doing city work, and then it would come 8 o'clock at night, and the dispatcher would say, "Okay, you're going to Chicago," and off that man would go to Chicago with zero sleep, and he would make it in 10 hours to Chicago, and quite often unload, reload, and come back.
Jeez.
Now, I got to tell you, very few of those guys are still alive now.
Yeah.
It aged me.
Yeah.
It's absolutely aged me. I can remember coming back through the mountains on snowy nights, sticking my head out the windshield and, doing the best I can to get as much cold air into me as I could, because, you knew you were just about at the final ringer, but yet you couldn't stop.
Yeah. Andrew, it reminds me of a story you told me once, and it was a profound story of you were running the same route, and I forget, it was from Calgary into the mountains in British Columbia every night, and one night you took your first wife for a truck ride, and she said to you, "You've got to stop this. You know the road too well." Would you tell our audience? That's a great story about familiarity breeds contempt. It just shows you how cocky we can get.
Oh, I was bad for that. Because we would run the mountains every single night, and we had an 11 3/4 hour time frame to do 600 miles to be on the other side of the hill. And that involved, the two passes, whether it be the Coquihalla and Rogers Pass, and or if you had to go through the canyon. Times were what they were. You just didn't have time. They just didn't allow time for, the massive snowfalls or chaining up or anything else like that would go through. But there was a night that I was coming back home, and I was quite light, and it was good weather. And I made from Sicamous, which is the halfway point between Calgary and Vancouver.
Right.
But I had made my trip back home in such a time that the company phoned me and asked me, like, were you in the mountains? Because your speeds were extremely high. And, we're taking corners that are listed for 60 kilometers an hour. We're doing about 115, 110. But we had VHF radios. We knew who was coming. We knew what the roads were doing. We knew what trucks were on the road. We knew what was in between the trucks. So we knew when we could straighten corners out. And we were consistently doing that to the point where I knew where every bump was. I could avoid every bump, whether it be coming onto a bridge or anything else like that. And it happened to be on a night where there was an avalanche, and, it came across the news, and my wife was actually at home watching the news, and she had seen, the news posting, and just happened to catch my truck there. And then next thing you know, I'm walking through the front door. Right. And so, it was one of those things where it was like, if you don't slow down and you don't get out of there, you're just not going to come home one night.
Yeah.
And I could have seen that, because it was, so I changed my route. But I have to say, it didn't change my habits any. I was a mountain guy. I was fast. I was, if I went up a hill, I could come down a hill a lot faster than a lot of guys. Right. So, it's not, I wouldn't say it's something to be proud of now. But it was stories. It was stories back then.
You know what? We have a different mentality today towards safety. I remember when you joined us, you brought in and you made us aware of it, the circadian rhythm. We'd never heard of it. And we educated our customers. You gave us that information that we weren't aware of, that we could go to the customer, and the customer then learned that you couldn't keep the driver waiting for 8 hours to load those last 3 pallets and expect them still to get to Chicago in time.
Right. Yeah, it does make even when I was running just strictly nights, The body, I guess for some people, they enjoy it, but for the vast amount of, the vast majority of people, your body's not really supposed to be up at that point in time of the day. And, traveling, when you have to do 600 miles and it's every single night, you don't get the sunlight, you don't get that nutrition into your body, and nutrition's a big thing that we've all neglected as truck drivers back in the day, right? It
And
certainly
today,
catches you as you get older, but nutrition was a big part of that. But yeah, it just absolutely, it ruins you, years and years upon years
Yeah.
of doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it does. We certainly know an awful lot more now than we did then. Andrew, in your you're looking at all sorts of different companies. If you could pick the perfect company that you would want to insure, okay, that you would say, you know what, I want to sell these guys insurance. Don't give it to, I hope they don't give their business to anybody else but us. What would they look like?
A private carrier.
Okay.
It's and the reason is, and it's not. I'm not saying that private versus say a general freight, like one's better than the other, or whatever. Again, it's the resources, right? They usually come with because it's designed differently.
Right.
It can be a little bit of a different mindset, and sometimes they're selling their brand. That their brand is that unit going down the road.
Of course.
So you can see, I mean, you can pick any private carrier that you want. It could be a bottling company, a drinking company, or anything else like that. And those are going to be the ones that have the inherent safety programs that they stick to. They also pay the drivers too, though, right? So which is also a big thing, right? Lower turnover rate.
get what you pay for.
Well, I've said this for years when it comes to drivers, and this is going back from me being one. So if any drivers are listening, I'm not slagging on any driver, because I've got a ton of respect for everybody that's still out there doing
You
this
always
job
did.
by all means. But we're inherently not wanting to be around the boss, right? We are our own boss. That's the way we are. We control our own destiny. We are who we are. But there's still, when you have structure, people gravitate to structure, and they will bucket and gripe and moan about it. But eventually, those that are going to be a good part of it will stick around with that structure, right? So it's those that don't like structure are probably not the ones that you want to have around, for too terribly long at all.
Yeah.
But a structured company, and like I said, really, it boils down from, and I mean, this from being in it for so many years, Chuck. It boils down from ownership to
Oh, yeah.
the drivers. And I mean, I don't know how many times I've sat with drivers meetings with you where you were the front of the, you were the target for the bows and arrows, but you stood there and took it because it was, it was your duty to do so. And even though you had a person like myself that could have done it, you did it.
Yeah. And I always enjoyed those driver meetings. We had to keep them, inevitably it was, the guys wanted to always change the narrative of the meetings to be about money and not about safety and doing things better. And you had to bring them back. But I think that's, and I got to the point after you left where I just said, guys, this is not we're not having a gripe session about how much money you should get or what the fuel surcharge should be or what. This is about safety. And we're devoting this time. We brought everybody in just to talk about safety. We'll talk about money later on. And you know what? We stuck to the program.
Hence why I said you were the target with the bow and arrows.
Yeah, they shot my head off.
Well, that's okay. I'm with you nowadays. It's all good.
And what
You know
about?
what? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, it still boils down to money, right? I mean, everybody's trying to do it to earn a living. The companies are trying to make a profit. Drivers are trying to earn a decent living and stuff like that. So, I mean, they can be valid concerns by all means. But yeah, we did get hijacked a few times. So, but I commend you. I mean, you stood there, but in the beginning, though, you always stood there and the culture was safety first.
Well, yeah, because it's the way I still look at it. It's you can't make money without having a safe culture. It doesn't work. I've watched people try to do it, cut corners and everything else. It just it doesn't work, and you want to avoid road calls and things like that. I remember almost getting into blows with our late friend Stevie, if you remember him.
Yeah.
And because he was going to send a truck to California, and I didn't like how much meat was on the trailer tires, and I called the tire guy to replace them, and he said you can get one more trip. And I said, if you have to have a road call, you're not going to have, like there goes the profit from the trip, you idiot. And we got into it by one. And it's
Well,
things.
I can remember you saying to me distinctly, and you said this more than once, and it stuck with me. You want to go home every night knowing that you did everything you possibly could to make sure nobody died.
That's, what I think I think that is, and I always said it to drivers when they came in for an interview. I always said, my biggest fear is having to knock at your door and tell your wife something's happened to you. I will do everything I can from my end to prevent that, but you got to do everything from your end. I will never, ever send you out tired. If you've been up all day, whether for us or someone else, you don't go out. That's all. There's no sense having you go, 20 miles up the road and take your 10 hours. You may as well just go home. Let's be honest. And we just, and that worked. We didn't have a lot of problems in my 40 odd years at the company. And the only time we did have problems was when we were lax with safety during the early years. But I remember I remember Doc and my son Doc and I smiling at each other. He had done those two. He brand new to the company. He had done two small acquisitions, if you remember, on the same day.
Yes.
One was a flatbed carrier, which was a nightmare. Okay, because they had no culture of safety whatsoever. And we didn't realize how badly their culture lacked safety. And we had it for probably 12 hours when some kid that I wouldn't even have hired rode off a truck. And you were there. That was,
Yes.
I'll never forget. And Doc and I looked at each other and smiled. And we knew it because you had it under control. Like that first, we said, man, where did this guy come from? This is like,
well, that was an odd one because I'd started with you as a consultant, and I was sitting in your boardroom when that accident happened, and it was up in Northern Ontario with the Super Bee.
Yeah.
And when they flipped it, their safety person phoned you to ask you what to do, and we took care of it from there, and we didn't, that was the start of the beginning.
Yeah, and luckily a little bit, but it wasn't that bad. And when interviewed him with you, and we found out how little experience this guy had, and I remember saying to him, "Well, do you remember he was going down a hill?" And I said, "What gear were you in going up going down the hill?" And he didn't even know to gear down.
No, yeah.
I just, what's your all take on recap tires on a trailer? I'm leased to a carrier and I pull chemical tankers, and I've had numerous blowouts on trailers, and they all been the result of running recap tires on the trailer. To me, they're dangerous, and I
brought it up to safety with my concerns as an owner operator, but they still love those tires. I think that the number one situation when it comes to recaps, especially if you're having them blow, Gino, is that they're not inflated properly.
Yes, 100%. I don't know about on a tanker, but I do know we've been running. I got talked into to trying recaps about 25 years ago and never looked back. Andrew, what's your take on them?
I never liked recaps personally, but that was because when we were out in the mountains, we were always in an influx of temperatures. So
Yeah,
we could get all four seasons going up a hill. You could start down at the bottom in a plus temperature, go up to a minus temperature, come back down. And, so depend again, like you said, and it was inflation, right? Like the tire inflation. And, have I seen them come undone just because of, say, like a bad casing or like it just wasn't put together properly? Sure, we've seen those, but um, over and all, you, I think if you're buying them reputably, that they're, and you're looking after them, they're not too terribly bad, but they're not my favorite. But I wasn't a fleet owner either that was looking at it from another standpoint, right? As an owner operator, and I had my own trailers, it always had straight virgin tires when I put them on.
I got to tell you, all I found with recaps was that we had to maintain air pressure, and I started a policy with the guys: don't pull out a hammer and start hitting tires around me. I don't want to ever see it. Check the tire pressure before you leave, because the amount of time you waste somewhere because you didn't check the tire pressure, you get a blowout. You could have saved it just by checking the tire pressure, and we can air the tire up, or we know that we've got a bad tire.
Yeah,
Now
and
you mentioned
the son we're
Old
talking
Stevie,
about.
and I. Oh, sorry, go on, Rico.
Well, I was just thinking about. I was watching someone on Instagram, and they were showing these newer scale houses have the technology now to where they can tell when you pull into the scale house. They can
Yes.
pinpoint which tire is underinflated.
Yep.
So yeah, it's definitely worth the while as part of the pre-trip to kind of develop the habit of going around with the tire chuck and just and sticking them. That's one of the benefits. It's twofold. It's twofold. One of the benefits of having a super single, and the bad side of having a super single. If you do blow one, you're dead in the water.
That's right. There's no nursing at home. I got to tell you guys, one of the things I bought before I left, probably my last trailer purchase, was I bought a bunch of reefers that had disc brakes and had the air inflation system on the tires. I got to tell you, no buyer's regret whatsoever on either.
I've always heard good things about those things as long as you bought, the basically the top of the line version that actually worked. There were some lesser versions out there that didn't do the job, but unfortunately, my days of driving kind of came to an end before the disc brakes became, something I would like to have tried those, but.
They're great from a maintenance point of view. They're great from a retention point of view. One of my core beliefs in this industry is you have a choice when you own a company. You either pay for retention or you pay for recruitment. Your choice. I have found that it was much more cost effective to pay attention. There's no two doubts about it, and it was a good way. Oh, we're froze
It,
Uh-oh.
again.
Froze
yeah.
up just a little
Oh,
bit.
no, I just found. I don't know if you heard what I said. It was a great recruitment tool, and I didn't do it for that reason.
Well, driver turnover is hard. It's costly, and every time you're bringing in a driver, you're always bringing in that unknown. You're bringing
Yes.
in the unknown of what's going to happen next. You know, everything can look good, and then 2 months down the road, you find that you have the guy with the bad attitude type thing. Um, so and again, for me, anyways, it comes back to the people that you work for, the people like the people at the top, and the culture that goes with it. But driver retention is, I mean, that's why they have symposiums on them, right? That's, you know, that's key.
I think it has to, excuse me, I think driver retention has to be embedded into the corporate culture right at the top. That our goal as a company is to not lose any good drivers.
Well, the only thing I'm seeing lately is that, you know, I mean, companies that say have low turnover rate and they've got that, it's just basically, you know, from retirement. We've lost so many guys that from the COVID problem, then, you
Yeah.
know, there's quite a few that have decided to just retire, and, you know, they don't want to deal with the new safety systems that are coming into the vehicles. And I mean, I'd be hard pressed if I had to go back to driving tomorrow. I'd have to reteach myself how to do some things, you know, because of, you know, old habits, you know, with all the new safety systems that are in vehicles nowadays. And so we've lost quite a few. So, you know, one of the biggest conversations I have nowadays is, where are we getting them from? How do we get them? You know, and what can we do? Sorry, but what can we do? You know, because our company needs drivers, right? And it's not the fact that it started with that they couldn't get the ones that would have the experience, the 3 to 5 years, but now I've gone to places where you know, they notoriously never had to put out an ad, say on an Indeed or out on the internet or Facebook or something, and now they have to. And, you know, 2 months down the road, they've had no replies to their ad.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely, I don't know, and then I get into this discussion. Is it a shortage of drivers or a shortage of money? I know part of the problem is certainly up here in Canada, it's the Driver Inc. thing. You know, that's one of the big battles I had before I left the company, and it was, you know, and I went as far as contacting ministers in Ottawa,
Yeah.
saying we got a problem, and I never heard so much malarkey in my whole life. The local minister told me to put an ad in it on Indeed. Like that's how, you know, I think he was a rower or a swimmer or something before he got into politics. And it was just a bunch of nonsense. And that really hurts because I had people tell me that they would rather work for half what I was offering, but not, you know, get paid as a company because it was to their benefit.
I see it as a moral hazard, you know, for the obvious reasons. There's higher exposure when it comes to them, to the company. You know, so it's not a good system. And I'm glad to see the Canadian trucking, you know, having their website out against it and everything else like that, and supporting the in their attempt to get rid of it.
Well, you know, the easiest way to really get the law enforced it's very simple. Tell the insurance companies if these drivers are not owner operators and they're not on the payroll, they're uninsurable. That's really that's the quickest and easiest way to solve this once for all. And you know what?
I don't have that power.
No. But you know what? In the long run, it would probably insurance companies to some degree. Private is actually somebody that's well then over there.
It's as I said, like if I see them, you know, it's definitely a moral hazard. You know, there's definitely things that have to be put in place to mitigate the risks and everything else like that. Because of course I'm going to look ahead for those kinds of things, but it's not that I guess we don't have that ability to turn around and say, you know, this is how you're gonna run your company. And I mean, the last thing I ever want to do is ever be seen as somebody that would ever try to come in and tell somebody, you know, how to do it. But you know, because I make sure that I go out of my way to not be that way with clients. But it's it's a problem, but it's a problem that's really only down here in Ontario and Quebec. You do not see this in any other parts of the country.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't realize you people out in Alberta and BC and didn't have this issue as well. Okay.
If it
Because
is,
there's more.
7 years that I've been here doing what I do now, and I've never seen it in Alberta out of anybody I've been to. But and it's industry known that what goes on in the Ontario and Quebec markets in the trucking industry for that. And but yeah, I don't see that out west. The culture out there has changed a lot. With trucking, there's a lot more safety. There's a lot more safety, adherence to things and stuff like that, and that even includes the with the long haul groups, for the general freight carriers and stuff like that. And I think a lot of that has to do with, believe it or not, and again, it's just my opinion, but social media, because it's a great way for them to expose themselves and show, hey, I am this, and you can be more profitable if you have that safety, because you're going to get the better customer, the better paying customer, because they know that they're not going to be held up because of issues to deal with that company.
Chuck must have had a glitch in the internet there.
Glitch in the matrix.
It's I'm looking at the time, and we're coming fastly up upon the top of the hour there, Andrew. So I wanted to give you an opportunity. I don't know if you wanted to or not, but before we get out of here, let people know if you want to, if anyone had any questions or wanted to follow up with you in the future, how could they get in contact with you?
Well, one of the things is I can't really provide any, because of what I do for a living, I can't provide just any unsolicited information out there to the average person. That'd have to be a client of ours type thing. So right. I don't really have any of that information to hand out, but they can always reach out to Chuck. Chuck and I are, we keep in close contact. We like to send each other pictures of old cab overs. And reminisce about days gone by when we seen two sticks, and for some reason that still gets us revved up. But anyways, if there was something, they could always reach out to Chuck, and by all means, he has every way of getting in touch with me.
And I will forward your emails. If anybody has any great questions for Andrew, send them to me. My email address, best way to get hold of me, is chucksnow280@outlook.com, and any questions, I'll get them to Andrew, and I'll be the conduit here. And with Rico, I first of all, I want to thank Andrew Stacey for joining us tonight. It was a real pleasure catching up and finally getting you on the show. And Rico, I'm going to let you back her in the hole for another week, buddy.
Absolutely.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, gentlemen. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Well, it's been an honor.
Thank you for taking the time to join us, Andrew. And ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you guys, the listeners and the viewers, for taking the time to hang out with us. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you took a little bit of time to hang out with us, and we are always grateful for you doing so. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we want you guys to remember, stay safe out there, stay healthy, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise, and God willing, we'll talk at you same time, same place next week. God bless you and good night.
Catch you on the flip-flop. God bless.
Good night.
Thanks again.